this is the case, though, introducing women into the capitalist market, right, where now rich industrialists own their labor, which they do, in order to give them the right to vote about stuff that's kind of meaningless ultimately towards themselves. What was the point of that for Marxism? It's totally counterintuitive.
Well, I'm not saying it's a movement towards Marxism. I'm saying that that's obviously like a liberal feminist movement, which is upward mobility within capitalism so that you can have access to...
So you don't support feminism?
I don't support liberal feminism.
But that's the only type of feminism we've had here.
In terms of certain movements, sure. I guess it would depend on how you classify certain movements. But when we're talking about like capitalist critique, those who think that women would find liberation having the same access to capitalist opportunities as men is a liberal feminist idea.
But well, I don't understand then. So do you support Western feminism or not?
I don't, if you want to label it as that Western feminism.
Okay, so the only feminism that I can point to is either the feminism here, or we can talk about communist feminism, but that was liberalized as well.
I disagree. I think we can see, when the Black Panthers in the 60s and 70s, that's where womanism was born out of, which is also Marxist theory.
Yeah, sure, but it was also part of a feminist movement.
Right.
The sexual liberation was a big part of what was going on in the 60s with Black Panther and female liberation too. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious though, first wave feminism, you agree, essentially fed all women into this massive capitalist machine, whereas they did not have to participate in it before.
I think that's a really exclusionary idea of first wave feminism, because there were also feminists who were abolitionists. There were also feminists who were poor, who wanted more rights for the working class, and those were kind of ignored. So I think if you want to label first wave feminism as essentially the suffragette movement, and the means to enter capitalist, I don't think that's all-encompassing of feminism.
First wave feminism is definitely responsible for millions upon millions upon millions of women entering into the workforce under rich capitalist industrialists. Single-handedly responsible for that.
Okay.
What else would it be that would be responsible for that?
Well, I think that's obviously what's at the forefront, but there are other sects of feminism that we're dealing with. Abolition, we're dealing with they never had any political power. Okay. So, we had the 1912 Lawrence textile strike, which was about working conditions. Yeah, but feminists have always moved towards working. But this is the problem again. Working conditions for what? To capitalism? To the work at capitalist plants? I guess I'm not sure what your overarching question is. My overarching point is, why would you support if you don't support first wave feminism, because it fed millions upon millions of women into the pocket in the pocket of rich industrialists, which it did, and you agree it did, and the second wave did, and the third wave, and now even the fourth wave. None of these feminist waves are anti-capitalist. No, I agree. So you don't support any of that, though, right? If we're going to have a critique of capitalism, I think we can have ways that we can see how women can be more liberated. I'm not critiquing capitalism. I'm critiquing the view of feminism. Right, but obviously if we're going to talk about capitalism, that those are intertwined. So if we're not going to abolish the system, how can women participate within capitalism that would give them opportunity or more liberation? I agree with you. Liberation is not possible under capitalism. Well, I would argue then that if this is the case, you're looking for more liberation, I would say that they're more liberated when they can't accrue debt. And they couldn't accrue debt. Only the man could accrue debt. And only the man who was married could accrue debt. Well, if you hold that philosophy, then are men oppressed? Yes. Okay. Yes, men are very oppressed. Okay, then I guess we don't disagree. So I got to ask, I wouldn't say for the same reasons you would, but the question becomes, is it the case that you think that women are more or less oppressed by capitalism now than they were when they were dependent on their husbands? Well, obviously capitalism has taken different form. So it would depend on essentially what metric we're evaluating. They have more access to education, which I would see would be less oppressive. Obviously the stressors of wealth. More oppressive. Education's oppressive? Yeah, it's way more oppressive to women To be educated?
What's the only type of debt women have that outnumbers men?
Again, that's just because of capitalism.
Hang on, just answer the question. What's the only type? It's student loans. So the idea of the education, right, which is mostly it's not like most of these are STEM degrees. They're not.
I mean, if education were free, would you say that they're being oppressed?
Education is free up until college age.
I know. I'm just asking, are we talking about the idea of education itself or the fact that it's so expensive?
No, we're talking about liberation from oppression. And so what I'm arguing to you
correct.
is that...
So when you say education is oppressive, is that because under capitalism of the cost that obviously debt is burdensome, or just a woman being educated is oppressive?
Yeah, I would say that the accruement of student debt, mostly being in the hands of women, has done more to oppress them than if they had not gone to college in the first place. Then if that had been barred from them... But that's
not my question.
What? Okay, but what's your question then?
My question is, you're not saying education is oppressive. You're saying either going into debt or the society making a profit off education obviously puts burdens on the person who's taking loans out.
Yes.
We don't disagree with that.
Yes.
I don't disagree.
But why are we selecting for that then?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you say that women need to be educated. Institutions are going to require capital in order to educate. So
right. So if, again, we're going to... education has definitely benefited women in terms of having the equal access to...
capitalism.
To certain aspects of society that would give them more opportunity and more identity.
It has literally led them to being pawns in capitalism.
Yep, just like men.
Yeah. So the thing is
I mean, if you think,
how is that? But how is that less oppressive? It's way more oppressive. So this is what I don't get.
I would say choice and individuality. So if we're talking about certain social ideas.
Yeah. Let's walk through it logically, right? So we start with women can't accrue no debt. Only their husbands can accrue debt. That's it. Only the husbands were able to accrue debt.
But then they're uneducated, correct?
No, they could still be educated.
How?
They would go to school.
Where?
Well, they had public school was available. By the way, women have always done better in public school. And then college was also available to them. Most of your first wave feminist leaders went to school. They went to college.
Right, but college was also free then.
No, it wasn't free.
Yeah, it was.
Where?
In the United States.
Where?
Like what specific college? I think Berkeley was free up until the 60s.
Okay. So when you're talking about college fees, it's important to understand that if it is the case that you want everybody to do a thing, you're going to have a lot of that thing for them to be able to do it. So when you're talking about education specifically, it used to be about rewarding the best and brightest. It is not about rewarding the best and brightest now. There's lots and lots and lots of people who go and get a college degree, and it's the equivalent of like a 10th grade education, 9th grade education, right? Okay. So if that's the case, right, all we're doing really is just lowering the standard anyway, right? Lowering the standard and then telling women that they need to go and use their birthing years in college, which makes no sense to me. It's very silly. You take the reproductive years, you say go spend the reproductive years in school so that you can be part of this capitalist machine. That's very strange to me that that's your advocation as a Marxist feminist.
I mean, obviously, if we're talking about the ideal situation, then women would have access to education without having to go into debt.
That's not, well, okay. How?
What do you mean, how?
Yeah, how? So we should pay for everybody's college.
Well, obviously, if we're going to live under a capitalist society, like this, at the center of that is going to be profit. So I just think that's an ineffective way to organize society, because then it's obviously putting profit over people.
So now this is circular now. So we start with capitalism's bad, liberate women so they can participate in capitalism. Capitalism's bad, liberate women so that they can become part of the capitalist machine.
No. So if we're going to talk about how women can have more opportunity and individuality over in capitalism, that's one argument. And then talking about how women can be fully liberated from the constraints of capitalism is a different argument.
Well, okay, let's talk. If you want to dice them up, I'm willing to dice the arguments up as small as you want to make them, or as large as you want to make them. So we can go as granular as you want.
Well, I'm just saying it's two different lanes, and it seems you can be combining it as one.
Okay, but what's the goal of Marxism? Stateless society, right?
Yeah.
I still don't understand how throwing women into the big capitalist machine as a form of liberation helps get us to that.
It doesn't.
Then why would you? I still am confused why you support those things.
I mean, I don't support necessarily like what you're specifically saying. If I had my like, how do we transition from capitalism to communism, is a different argument than how can women suffer less oppression under capitalism.
Yeah, but if you don't agree with those things, and first wave feminism was about liberation to participate in capitalism, then you don't support first wave feminism.
I don't like classifying feminism in terms of those waves because it just reduces it down to a singular idea where there are multiple sects of ideas. So yes, if you want me to say I don't agree, I don't agree.
Okay, well, what are the prominent ideas then?
Sure. Yeah.
The prominent ideas were definitely...
I don't agree.
Yeah. So
if that's what you want me to say.
So then I don't know that you're a feminist at all, just a Marxist.
Well, I mean, have you heard of TERFs?
Yeah.
Would you say that's a form of feminism?
It's a very traditional form of feminism.
Yeah, I'm not a TERF, so does that mean I'm not a feminist? I feel this is like no true Scotsman fallacy.
No. I have to say there are prominent sects of feminism, right?
Yeah, you have radical feminism, liberal feminism, intersectional, Marxist.
Yeah.
So I'm saying
but all of them are basing it around the liberation of women. Just the different ideas around the basis of the liberation of women.
There's capitalism, which I'm sure we could define and say there's different functions of capitalism.
Yeah, so first wave feminism definitely wanted to liberate women so that they could have their own assets and go to work.
Correct.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
I mean, go to work, like women have always worked, especially poor and women of color. So I think like going to work is kind of maybe like a white-centered notion. I will acknowledge that I think in the early 1900s we had about 20% of women in the workforce, and then by like 1950 I think it was close to 50.
Especially you had the post-World War II people who were staying in the workforce.
Sure, exactly.
But the thing
it depends on who you're counting
again,
as well.
Definitely first wave feminism was responsible for this. So the thing is I guess when you're talking about Marxist feminism specifically, you would have to kind of hate first wave feminism because it did more.
In a lot of notions I do, because I do think it ignored the material conditions of poor women, women of color. So yeah, I don't disagree.
Okay.
Just I'm sure you support capitalism, right? Do you like social democracy?
Well, I'm not sure that that's contingent on capitalism.
That is a capitalist mode, just like a laissez-faire free market would be. There's different ways that capitalism can be structured, and you can agree with one.
Yeah, but capitalism is an economic system. It's not as much of a political theory as Marxism.
I'm just showing how an idea can have different theory behind it.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm talking about the prominence of the ideas themselves.
Sure, I guess if I must not have understood. No, I don't agree with some of the modes that liberal feminism or first wave feminism, as you've called it, have used.
So then wouldn't you agree with me then that it actually would have been more liberating for women to not have participated in first wave feminism but instead relied on their husbands? Wouldn't that have actually been more liberating than sacrificing them to the sacrificial lamb of capitalism?
Which is worse? I don't know. There's just so many metrics that you can evaluate when it comes to...
Well, this is the metric we're evaluating. So the metric we're evaluating is, my argument is, if women are dependent on their husbands and accrue no debt, only the husband can accrue debt, but women can still own assets, which they could. And they could still own property, which they could, even if they were married.
Right, but you're forcing a woman to link arms with a man. So if she's single, does she have access to these things?
As opposed to
if
forcing
she's a
her
lesbian,
to go to work.
Does she have these things?
Yeah, yes, of course.
How would you have these things?
How would they not have them? They were able to own property even unmarried. That's always been the history of the United States.
Right, but obviously then you would need to be in the workforce, correct? Because you need to purchase it?
No, you wouldn't need to purchase it. Oftentimes your father would give it to you.
Oh, so just through, again, like generational wealth.
Yeah. Which, by the way, first wave feminism destroyed a lot of that too. A lot of cross-generational wealth. But women could own property.
Sure. I mean, I would say, like, why would I have to pick one?
Because your choice is either you go to work, right? You either want equality or you don't want equality. So if the idea is I want equality, and that's what
I think it would be more beneficial for women not to be dependent on men and to have more liberty.
Than to work within the capitalist system?
Yes.
Why?
Because they would have more control, autonomy, and identity.
They don't seem to have more control over either of or any of those things. Example, the identity of woman now in modernity is in question, period.
What do you mean?
What is a woman?
Oh, we're going there now.
Well, you just said women would have more identity. Because
identity in terms of if you're going to be dependent on a husband, then your labor is predetermined for you. Your identity in terms of being a wife and mother is predetermined for you.
Yeah, but the beneficiaries of that is that your accruement of debt is also non-existent, and so you can never be a slave to capitalism.
It's not really non-existent because your husband has it as well. So, I mean, there is still capitalistic threat.
You were not ever responsible for your husband's debt.
But you still suffer the outcomes if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah, but you suffer the outcomes of that now under capitalism.
Right, but you would have more control and autonomy, right?
You don't seem to have.
It's either like you're the captain of your own sinking ship, or you're just kind of a passenger on the Titanic.
Like, you use these words, these kind of buzzwords, right? You say they have more autonomy. Mm-hmm. How do women have more autonomy?
Self-determination through choice.
What choices? Which ones?
Essentially how they want to experience their life. Do they want to get married? Do they want to have children?
They had the option to do that before. They didn't have to get married. Most of the time, women who didn't get married stayed at home with their parents. By the way, right now, most women who don't get married, they often stay at home with their parents. Not a lot has changed in that department.
I mean, I haven't read any statistics that women who don't get married just stay home with their parents.
Yes, it's often the case that women who do not get married stay at home with their parents. Yeah,
because
it's often true with men too, and it was often true with men then.
I think single women home purchases are starting to outpace men.
It's true.
Yeah.
But it is often the case.
So it seems that they're getting their own house.
Sometimes, but you got to remember now, children are staying at home with their parents longer than ever.
So obviously, like, the conditions that comes to capitalism now is different than it was, in the 1900s.
Yeah. So the thing is that I don't see how women actually have any more of these things. I don't see how they have any more autonomy. I don't see how they have any more actual choice. It just seems like an illusion of choice.
I would agree with you. There is some oppression within that choice, but I do think the choice is more.
Okay, and it's worth it to have this limited amount of autonomy in order to grind yourself in a capitalist system. Like, if you were to ask the average woman, if you were to go back in time, hypothetically, and you were to sit down with first wave feminists, okay, who couldn't seem to get first wave feminism passed any other way than an amendment because women were voting it down all over the place. The question becomes, if you ask them, if we fast forwarded this to 100 years, I just want to let you know that your children will be living at home with you until they're 25. You will have access to college, but you'll have crushing debt, and chances are your marriage is going to fail. Chances are really good that your marriage is going to fail, over 50% perhaps, that your marriage is going to fail. But you'll have a little tiny bit more autonomy, but I won't even be able to exactly tell you how you have more of it. Do you think that they would go for that deal? Or if you said, hang on, or if you said to them, if you don't do this, your husbands will accrue all debt. You'll never have to worry about it again, and you can still make moral claims, and they'll be super effective, just like the temperance movement was, because now you're not political pawns.
I mean, I think you're kind of constructing the options in a way that would be beneficial to a specific narrative. I think I have cleared how you have autonomy. Like, would you want men to be dependent on women and have women be the predominant mode of production under capitalism?
I don't think it's possible.
But would you want that?
Well, I couldn't want a thing I don't think is possible.
Why?
Because it's not possible.
Well, I mean, why is it not possible?
It's not possible because women are not capable of doing the same types of things that men are capable of doing.
Such as?
Inside of society, enforcement.
Enforcement? Mm-hmm. So, like, police and...
No, military.
Military?
Mm-hmm. Military, policing,
I don't think
special
men
services.
Really I don't think men really are capable of that.
I mean, the men have gone and fought global wars time and time again and won.
Yeah, and what outcomes do they have?
They win the war.
They suffer severe PSD. They have a hard time integrating into society. I mean, that doesn't seem like a natural condition for men to be subjected to.
There can be symptoms of violence, but remember, not everybody gets PTSD, even combat veterans. A lot of them don't have PTSD. Some get PTSD.
Right.
But not only that, that's a coping mechanism. It's going to be individualistic.